Chapter 6 A Bad Omen. They marched on the sand, attempting to maintain speed to an extent. "You think Lorenzo will wake up soon? I kinda miss him," Hoax randomly commented. "No idea. It's only been around an hour. You're a pretty clingy friend, you know." Shadow giggled, clearly intending for a slight tone of humour. Unfortunately, it was only met with a sigh. "There's not much stuff around here. Quiet, the wasteland." Shadow attempted to move past the somewhat rude joke, which Hoax noticed and appreciated. "Yeah, you're right. Not as interesting as cultist camps or big snowmen." He attempted to list the majority of struggles they faced as a group. "Well, at least we aren't on the verge of death." Shadow showed a remarkably unusual attitude of optimism. "It's hot though," Hoax continued complaining, completely foiling Shadow with pessimism. They practically changed roles. They kept conversing, however it was cut short by abrupt sounds. "What's that?" Hoax showed a piece of his typically clueless personality. Shadow stopped, immediately looking around. He was on full alert now. "I have no idea, but let's look around, just to be safe." He practiced caution, looking around every nook and cranny for something. After a while, Hoax, who wasn't looking around as intensely as Shadow, found something somewhat suspicious. "Yo, look at this rock!" Hoax waited for Shadow to come to him. "This better be important. If you're just showing me a cool rock, I'll be disappointed." He sighed, eating his words within quick succession of analysing the rock. "This is part of a mechanism." He turned to Hoax. "Push the rock into the ground. I'm curious as to what events will transpire." Shadow elaborated on his sudden request, much to Hoax's approval. "Alright." He gave Shadow a thumbs up, pushing the rock into the ground as he asked. It wasn't long before they noticed a difference in their surroundings. "Just as I thought." Shadow turned. "Huh?" Hoax was confused, turning the same direction. "An entrance that we shall enter." He began walking forward. "What about Lorenzo? If we bring him inside, it could be bad." Hoax frantically searched for the excuses to remain outside of this suspicious secret place. "Stay out then. I'll be inside." He concluded their conflict, entering the place ahead of them. Hoax simply cowered in fear, hugging the unconscious Lorenzo. He pulled out a torch from literally nowhere and looked around. This seems to be a temple of sorts. That's not all that surprising considering our recent encounters, Shadow thought to himself, seeming more reserved as of recent. Let's hope it's safe to continue this scouting session. He composed himself, continuing deeper into this possibly hellish dungeon. He noticed things on the walls that resembled art, possibly working together to create stories. "This is somewhat interesting," Shadow commented to himself, becoming more invested in his surroundings over time. "I may find myself spending quite an extended period of time here," he stated, reaching his peak of investment. After a few minutes, he concluded his thoughts on one of the many stories ahead of him. Shadow decided to bundle them up and relay them to himself, however. So, a monster of some kind presumably made its way through the desert. Alongside that, one special person forged a blade from 6 resources and then engaged in combat with that monster. It seems throughout this battle, that blade had numerous abilities, being incredibly powerful. And then the monster fell, and then she won afterwards. Shadow finished, taking a deep breath, seeming irritated for a moment. However, that didn't last. There's only more stories to go. He took a sigh of excitement, continuing his exploration in the dungeon. He continued cowering in fear, which was being amplified by his current environment. Night was falling upon the somewhat cowardly, late teenager. As the realization that he had to inevitably enter the dungeon soon set in, his fear only grew, but he was becoming more comfortable with the idea as he overthought the whole situation. "I could die if I stay out here. I mean, clearly that gladiator could hunt me down again. More monsters could get me. Sandworms exist too. They're colossal." Hoax freaked out more and more as he indulged in a solo conversation with himself. He looked around one last time, preparing to grab Lorenzo. "I'm going in then. I need to be more helpful. I need to be talented. Worth something," Hoax convinced himself, gulping as he began a slow march into the dungeon near him. He carried Lorenzo, over-observing all of his surroundings out of caution in the moment. Once he made it even remotely close to the dungeon, he rushed inside, grabbing a stick for self-defense beforehand. Hopefully, he wouldn't regret this. He had finished another story, a sequel of sorts. Around the time of the conclusion, he heard a sudden bump nearby. That sound was quite peculiar. I wouldn't doubt this place was empty after all. Shadow became ever so slightly weary of his situation. However, he continued translating the story and writing it down. "She died to her own son? That's unexpected. However, it is survival of the fittest. I know somebody who doesn't belong in the fittest category." He looked in the direction of where he entered, clearly thinking of someone. Afterwards, he continued analysing the art. It seems as if this hero was only paid a hard check of tragedy in the end. I too understand that reality, Shadow mumbled, clearly thinking of more things that affected him this time. He fought the deep-rooted, hidden emotion inside of him though. Regardless, that's all over now. I've changed my goal in the end. That'll reward me the opposite of tragedy. Shadow had an unusual, sinister aura for the peace of only a moment. That aforementioned moment would soon end once he noticed the ending of the story. Alright, that's over. Enough of my monologuing. It's time to begin my journey back. He cracked his knuckles, turning around and walking back up the stairs he went down previously. However, as he was beginning to reach the stairs, something shined from behind him. Shadow wasn't going to ignore this, approaching where he saw it come from. Hoax only took a slight amount of time before he was sucked into the same art Shadow came across. This is seriously screwed up. What the hell? This monster is disturbing. He instinctively brought his arms up, disgusted. He hadn't come across the sequel, but found a piece of art Shadow couldn't have imagined coming across. A sword? Inside of a garden? That isn't as disturbing as the monster, at least. Hoax shrugged, though his relieved expression quickly faded away as bloody writing coated the walls neither of the two witnessed prior. Huh? His energy was drained. Hide from it? He turned, seeing more. It's coming for you? Hoax's anxiety began to rise, causing him to reluctantly speed up. Oh my god, her son is still alive? This sword is here? He began freaking out like earlier. Hoax froze, unintentionally dropping Lorenzo onto the ground. He realized Shadow didn't have much time before something came for him too. They had both read the story after all. I need to get Shadow, he yelled, completely forgetting about Lorenzo. Shadow, Shadow, where are you? Hoax frantically searched the top layer of the dungeon, being met with nothing. He didn't realize he was already too late. What Hoax heard next caused him to freeze again for a moment, as if his body shut down and the world's speed halted. A scream pierced his ears from below. He couldn't think as much as he typically did, immediately bolting towards where he heard it. As Hoax ran, the screaming continued. He had always feared being useless, but that fear was exactly what kept him from being useful. I don't care if this is scary. I need to save my friend, he yelled to himself, causing him to finally feel the anger everyone else experiences at one point in their lives. It's always an important moment. This was his important moment. The waste and dunes wouldn't conquer the previously weak Mr. Hoax. This thought went straight into his head and never left. He knew he had to be the victor of this next battle once he made it to the source of the screaming. A sword rested in the garden with an impossible ray of sunlight showering the nature surrounding it. It was peaceful, however ruined by the thing on the other side of that sword. A person, or a robot, or monster, who was strangling Shadow right in front of his eyes. He had one thing to say before engaging in combat. This one true anger better fuel my victory. I'll be good enough, I promise, Hoax yelled, finally earning a little bit of respect from Shadow. Hoax noticed Shadow fall unconscious to the faceless monster in front of him, which managed to grow his anger even more. He looked around, noticing chandeliers, candles, and rocks placed inside the garden. Based on his enemy's appearance and strength, Hoax was reminded of his physical shortcomings. However, that's what caused him to think of a plan. Hey, can you speak? Hoax yelled, being met with no response. Fine then, he sighed, running towards his enemy. This was completely illogical for Hoax's previously established approach though. The anonymous foe felt a boost of confidence due to this advance in their battle, preparing to knock Hoax back. Unfortunately for the foe, Hoax stopped, seemingly scared. He immediately ran back to his beginning area once a shred of fear was displayed in his face. Hoax's foe saw this as confirmation of his upcoming victory, running toward the once again cowardly teenager. But once the enemy made it close enough to slash, Hoax jumped out of the way, hitting the wall with enough force to cause the chandelier to come loose. It fell onto Hoax's nemesis within a small amount of time. You fell for it, idiot, he scoffed, causing a mutual anger between the two to unfold. However, his enemy obviously wasn't done fighting, struggling to escape. Hoax walked over to the garden, seemingly to get a better look at the faceless person. Here's a deal. I'll make your death merciless if you accept your defeat right now. If not, you'll burn, Hoax explained, seeming far more content with his battle skill now that he succeeded in his first trick. Shadow was beginning to move in the midst of all this, which wasn't noticed by the threat. He wasn't fully unconscious, just incredibly weak. Suddenly, the foe jumped up to attack Hoax, which was only met by a candle dropping on the grass as he dodged. Knew you'd do that, he laughed as he avoided the slash, or so he thought. It hit his leg, However, he of course survived. The person fell straight into the fire, seemingly being burned by it. Hoax looked at his wound. You might have won that small battle, but it seems you didn't win the war. Not sorry. He smiled, using his long-anticipated stick to get up. He looked at the fire once again, seeing nothing out of the ordinary. This caused him to lower his guard, resulting in him heading to Shadow to assist in the situation. His friend began moving more and making sounds, relieving Hoax. As he attempted to do all he could, Shadow finally could move again properly. He got straight to the point, of course. What happened? Where did that guy go? Shadow was understandably confused, not even registering the possibility of Hoax's combat succeeding. I won. You're safe, Mr. Hoax explained, much to his companion's surprise. Wow. You could defeat somebody I couldn't. I'm impressed. I respect you considerably more now. Shadow seemed relieved, struggling to get up, however. Hoax sighed. Did he do more harm than just a basic knockout? He began feeling guilty for not joining his friend when he first entered the dungeon. Perhaps. I forgot. It's irrelevant now. We can just wait in the end. Shadow showed more of his previous optimism, much to Hoax's approval. Alright, about that sword. He was cut off instantly. Give it to me after the fire. I believe there's a reason that person was guarding it. Shadow explained his abrupt request, Hoax agreeing with little curiosity or confusion. They waited a while for the fire to smolder, not bothering to accomplish much in that time frame. Why don't we just use water? Hoax suggested innocently, quickly being shot down by Shadow. That could rust the sword, alongside more unforeseen reactions. He explained, sighing. But couldn't the fire do the same? Putting it out could be a good thing, Hoax argued, much to Shadow's dismay. You're annoying. Fine, go off. He gave up, clearly too tired to argue. This was only proven more when he decided to rest immediately after their interaction. Time to go off. Hoax prepared dramatically for what he would do next. He grabbed a nearby bucket, taking some water from the garden and aiming it toward the fire in front of him. Sucks I caused this, but you gotta do what you gotta do, right? Hoax sighed, pouring the water and revealing what he had been waiting for, the sword. So, should I grab it for you? He yelled at the Shadow, waiting for an answer. Yeah, just be careful with it. There must be more to it, he warned Hoax, being met with a thumbs up. Soon after, he grabbed the sword. It was difficult at first, but Shadow had mentioned it was impossible for him when he tried. Somehow, after what felt like years, it moved a little. A little turned into a mild amount, and then a lot. Before Hoax knew it, he was holding onto an ancient relic, what was coined the Omen's blade. He felt a mysterious power surge through his body, but he felt something else. A looming threat nearby. Something hell-bent on hunting him down. When he turned around, his enemy from only a few moments ago was alive and well, and this caused Hoax to both figure out the last piece of the puzzle and finally drop his stick. Fortunately, his leg had almost healed by now. This undying will to live only matched one character in the story, the hero's son. He wasn't even close to human anymore. Once this was realized, Hoax didn't exactly react positively. You're disgusting for killing your own mother, you know. Nobody can just do that and get away with it. You're going down, Hoax exclaimed with anger, immediately causing her son to show a human emotion, irritation. He noticed this, alongside realizing something had changed. This isn't a battle for survival anymore. This is a battle of justice! Hoax yelled, bringing his new blade down onto her son, which he knocked away with ease. Hoax was caught off guard for the first time in battle. After the blade was knocked away, her son went to attack, but abruptly stopped, looking around in confusion. This also surprised Hoax. However, a small discovery prompted him to check his hands. He was invisible all of a sudden. Shadow had fallen asleep before the battle had begun, therefore missing out on this. Once Hoax noticed this, he didn't take the time to be shocked, instead dedicating his time to attacking the newfound enemy. Hoax snuck behind him, knocking him over hard enough to bring down the second chandelier, pummeling down onto her son, but also Hoax. They were suddenly both trapped underneath the object, and his enemy knew that if he escaped, Hoax would also be able to. So instead, the evil being attempted to grab the sword, supposedly finding it. Hoax had grabbed something too. They both focused on bringing their items closer to gain a grip on them. They struggled as they battled to be the first to attack, causing exhaustion. Hoax yelled out for Shadow, however he was still dead asleep from boredom. They both kept going at it until her son halted his attempts, focusing on attacking. Hoax struggled to stand his ground, instinctively turning invisible again. This didn't help as much as last time, but it let his attacks be unpredictable. Hoax threw a few punches and kicks to stun his enemy underneath the chandelier. They worked temporarily, allowing Hoax to make progress on pulling his item towards him. This effectively guaranteed that he would be able to reel in his item, trying as hard as he possibly could. The angle that he had to pull it at was extremely uncomfortable, however he was determined to both serve justice and survive this encounter. The son had finally continued his progress, though attempted to kick Hoax. None of them hit, as he was disoriented due to their situation. This boosted Hoax's confidence, allowing him to finally grab his item. He still didn't know what it was due to this angle. The son realized this, immediately speeding up. The pressure was clearly rising, and Hoax was ready to attack. He brought the item up, realizing what it was. He didn't have time to think, however. The bad omen of a son had also finished grabbing the apparent blade, instantly slashing, but it was only the stick. Hoax had also attacked, using the real blade. The son fell into a deep state of pain, immediately trying to escape from the wreckage they found themselves in, allowing Hoax to get up. Even though they both escaped, her son fell back over due to the pain of the blade. "It's time to end the bad omen with the good omen of your mother," Hoax said loud and clear, grabbing his blade and standing proud. "I do hope you both find peace with each other once again. However, I must serve justice in order for that to happen. Goodbye," he concluded with a sincerely serious tone, beheading his enemy, and ending a long saga they had only recently learned of. Hoax put a few of the flowers from the garden onto the lifeless body on the ground in front of him, resting the blade next to his head too. He rushed over the shadow, noticing he was still fast asleep. However, this didn't stop Hoax from carrying him back up the stairs, anticipating a fully conscious Lorenzo awaiting for them. They survived, and they served justice.